Welcome to the show. I'm Vivian Kobusingye Birchall, your host, and my special guest again is Mr. Melvin Foote, the president of Constituency for Africa in Washington, D.C. Mr. Foote, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Well, when we initially started having this conversation about this interview, it was heavy on or focused on the coups that are happening in Africa and how that, how devastating it might be for the communities there. But since that time, you have done a lot of work and you just returned from Mali. So, and I think you were a part of a delegation that is a pioneer trade mission to Mali. And so maybe we'll start there. What was that mission about, and why did you decide to be a part of it?
Well, my work with the Constituency for Africa means that, we're trying to bridge the gap between African people in Africa and here in the United States and throughout the world. So I don't lose sight of that. My job is not to boss Africans around. My job is not to put Africans against Africans. My job is the opposite: bring people together. And give us the opportunity to support one another. We can support Africa, and Africa can support us, and we can support each other. To me, it's a simple process. So I work with all kinds of groups and organizations across this country who are diaspora related. And I would say over the years, we largely succeeded in our mission, although we have a long way to go. We made a lot of progress. And so a lot of the African groups, African immigrant group, they approached me. So one of them, a woman named Mama Traore, who's a Malian American based in outside of Philadelphia. And she's a former basketball player at Temple University, a dynamic woman. So I met her through my people in Philadelphia. They're building what is known as Africa Town in Philadelphia, and she's very much a part of that. And she coordinates a lot of the trade and investment for Philadelphia and the diaspora. So she's been really following CFA quite closely, and she comes to a lot of our meetings here in Washington and elsewhere, and I meet her in Philadelphia all the time. So we've become very good friends. Over time, we've become very good friends. So she asked me to introduce her to the new Mali ambassador to Washington, which I did, and we went over to the embassy together and we had a very good conversation. But her view is, certainly she loves Mali. I mean, if you're from Mali, you can't help but love Mali. You can't help it. You cannot help yourself. Tremendous culture, tremendous people. And so she put together, she wanted to do a trade mission to Mali, and that went against all protocol. The U.S. government was saying sanctions on Mali because of the coup. And, they thought, oh, got security problems in Mali. You can't go. And so against all of that, she said, Mel, I want to organize a delegation to go to Mali on a trade mission. That's what this mission was. Now, unfortunately, Mama Traore is pregnant. And so she personally could not travel. She's 7 or 8 months pregnant. And so she was devastated because everything was coming together. But she became the de facto desk officer here in the United States while we had the mission. And her mother and her sisters really picked it up on the other end. And they're just like her. You can see they're from the same, peas of the same pod. So we put together a delegation. She asked me to identify, I think she gave me three other people. She said, who else can go from, private sector? You just pick them. Tell me who you want. And so I picked a few good people, and she had some others. So we ended up with 12 who were part of this trade mission. There were Malians, there were African immigrants. There was one woman from Canada, a friend of mine from Canada, who runs the Africa Trade Desk in Ottawa. We had one from Great Britain, a Cameroonian British. So it turned out to be a very dynamic delegation. Now, of course, my government, advised me against it. All of the rhetoric coming from the U.S. government was sanctions and you can't go and security and blah, blah, blah.
I'm trying
but
to
we went.
Yeah.
We went. And I would say that it was absolutely a fantastic trip. I would say that it was the fact-finding mission was absolutely outstanding. We got a chance to meet a lot of private sector in Mali. The U.S. ambassador to Mali, who was a friend, I've been supporting her since she became the ambassador, but she's one of the best ambassadors in Africa. She was gung-ho about this. And so she was also very present at the opening ceremony, and she invited us to her house for a reception with top-level Malian entrepreneurs. So all in all, it was absolutely exhilarating. It was the only criticism I had, we had no downtime. It was just go, 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 go. And by the time you finish going, it's go to the airport. The criticism that we all have is that, boy, we didn't see enough of the culture. We didn't see enough of the market, because we were always in these meetings and going. But all in all, it was a tremendous experience. I'm in the process of writing my final report, which I hope to have ready in the next few days, before Thanksgiving for sure. And, I'm certainly going to submit it to the White House and to the State Department, because the biggest lesson that, I think that we can learn is that the U.S. should be careful about, coming down hard on African countries and lecturing to them. If you don't agree on something, you don't agree on some governance issues or something, and you go into the issues of Mali and the Sahel, you'll find out that the U.S. made missteps that helped to create the situation. I mean, we were partly, you kind of say we had some culpability there. But we're going to come down like we're their fathers or something. And you can't do this because we're the United States. Whoa, So you got to start out with people, and then you got to end with people. It's people to people. And we found as Americans, as diaspora, talking to Mali, and we had a lot to talk about, had a lot in common. We had a lot in common about a lot of things, not just trade, but about U.S.-Africa policy, about security, about all kinds of things, which I'm certainly at liberty to brief my government and those who want to hear about the way forward. So rather than approach this as a government dictating to some other government in Africa, why not start out with some people who are have access to people, talk to people, and start from there. I think we could do a better job of our relationship building in Africa. And I think we can get better initiatives that can be win-win both for Africa and for America.
Well, Mr. Foote, as always, now I have the same dilemma of there is so much. Where do I even start? Because
I know.
You have quite a wealth of experience. I mean, we're talking about U.S.-Africa policy. We're talking about building relationships, building, investment opportunity or creating investment opportunities. And of course, you introduced the whole idea of when do we punish these countries and how do we punish them as the United States. So it is, it's a lot to that really works. There's a lot to consider when we're talking about these issues. But let's go back to, and of course you said that you were go. I feel like that's your life. You're always on the go. But that's another conversation. Let's go back to Mali and the Sahel. You mentioned very briefly about the security issues, the concerns, the advisories that you had to get from the U.S. government before making this trip. So what has been your observation about, these conflicts? We have been plagued, or the continent has been plagued by these coups, especially in the Sahel region, in West Africa. What are your thoughts?
Well, for sure, we know France colonized this region. France colonized Niger, Burkina, Mali, getting all of these countries that have experienced coups. The one common denominator you will find is France. Now, why are these countries rising up against France? Well, okay, over hundreds of years of colonization, which you will find is very little development has occurred because of it. You'll find that the relationship economically has been totally exploited. And Niger, which is one of the largest places to get uranium, France has been dominating it and paying, the amount that they were paying back to Niger was minuscule. And so what do you see? You see underdevelopment. You don't see roads. You don't see hospitals. You don't see schools. You don't see, and all of these countries are experiencing, as well as all of Africa, really, youth bulge. The population of Africa is the youngest population in the world, and it's something like 70% of the population under 35. A lot of them are 17, 18, 20 years old, and these young people are also digitally connected. They all have Facebook. They all have, they're all communicating digitally. So the day of ignorance of the continent is over. These young people know what you're doing over there. They know what's happening over there. And you have a coup over here. You better expect you're going to get some reaction over there. And so the young people are just fed up with it. They saw Thomas Sankara get murdered. They've seen a lot of tragedy. Anytime Africa try to stand up and be who they want to be, you'll see that also France put so these young people stood up basically, and they urged their military to take over. They saw corruption. They saw the leaders all driving around in big cars and all this kind of thing. And they saw very little opportunity for jobs. They saw very little opportunity for education. They saw very little hope. That's why a lot of them are getting on these boats and trying to take a boat across the Mediterranean, risking their lives because they don't see any opportunity at home. And so it's not surprising whatsoever. So the U.S. response, by and large, has been to support our ally, France. And why are we doing that? You can ask yourself from my perspective, why are we doing that? France is not an economic power by any stretch of the imagination. Why are we backing them as opposed to backing Africa? As opposed to talking to Africa and saying, how can we help to secure your countries? How can we help to build an economic, parity so that your resource, your natural resources are going to benefit your people, the people who live here, the jobs and all this kind of thing. I think we stood behind France, and so when these coups occurred, we were shocked, because we thought the Africans are just going to be happy. Well, they're not happy, and so that's where we find ourselves today. And I think that there's an opportunity for the U.S. to rethink how we view Africa. We claimed after the last summit that we were going to have a new relationship with Africa. We showing Africa we're going to be that's great, but the talk is relatively cheap, and now we ought to put our actions behind the talk.
Right. Speaking of, those commitments, especially during the U.S.-Africa summit, some of them were healthcare related. So which brings me to my next question. Through your work over the years with the Constituency for Africa, and, you've been a part of delegations, and most recently the trade delegation to Mali. What are some of the priorities when it comes to, investment, areas for investment on the continent? And I ask this with this in the background. I'm passionately and very eager to see more investment in the healthcare sector, because without good health, then you have, the society is going to be extinct at some point. I mean, I'm not saying literally, but we have a fractured healthcare infrastructure on the continent. So in your conversations, your work, your brainstorming sessions, and your influence in U.S.-Africa policy, what are the priorities for investment that you've seen?
Well, the reality is healthcare is a challenge for African people worldwide. It's certainly a major challenge for Africans on the ground in Africa, but you're going to find it's a problem for Africans living in Europe. is a problem for Africans living in the United States. I can take you to parts of Washington right now, and you would be kind of surprised at the lack of access to healthcare. And so we as African people got to understand that a lot of these problems are interconnected. It's not just a question of Africa, but Africa is certainly, we all have known that, the lack of infrastructure on the ground in Africa is absolutely shocking. And another part of it is you'll find that the best and the brightest of the African healthcare professionals, the best and the brightest, you'll find them up at Harvard, you'll find them at Stanford, you'll find them at Georgetown, you'll find them at the best medical centers in this country, saving us, if you will, as opposed to working on the ground in Africa. You'll find that African nurses are throughout our health system. You'll find that researchers are doing. So we got a big part of the problem is this brain drain and our inability to transform our healthcare on the continent of Africa. I was only pushing the U.S. government as probably one of its commitments to commit to building, let's say, 5 state-of-the-art healthcare institutions in Africa. I can see one dealing with cancer and non-communicable diseases, maybe one dealing with malaria, infectious diseases, maybe something children related, something dealing with water, maybe from different parts of the continent, so the continent can actually benefit, some kind of way and improving the healthcare with America's name on the top of the hospital. If you want to show what you're doing, do these kinds of things. Organize the technology so that we could use telemedicine in a way that, really access to the masses of the African people. We can do that. We can have people out in the little villages out in Timbuktu having access through their computer to see a doctor, if necessary. The technology exists for us to do that, but there's a political will and the resources necessary to do it. I don't think, we're going to need the African leadership to stand up and demand some of this stuff. That's part of it. Africans continue to deal in the individual platform, individual countries, little small places like Burundi standing up as a country. Come on. Africa and the African Union must stand up and demand more for Africa and for African people if it's to become reality. But you can't expect that the Western world, including the United States, are going to do the right thing without pressure coming from Africa and from African people.
But one would say that the Western world doesn't have the obligation to do anything. It's all out of their mercy, or for lack of a better word, that they can give some support to the African Union.
Yeah, but we want your diamond, we want your gold, we want the coltan, we want the timber, we want the fish, we want all of this stuff that Africa has in abundance. Congo, come on. But so it's a negotiation, if you will. It's not a matter of just charity. No, negotiation. And I think that the world owes Africa a lot more than I'm looking at issues of climate change, and you hear about all this tremendous flooding occurring and all these problems happening. And Africa was not the one who polluted the world, not the one who created the greenhouse gases, but Africa's paying a tremendous price for this. Mm-hmm. And so I think in the scope of things, Africa needs to do a much better job negotiating a fair place in the world.
And maybe one thing I forgot to ask right at the start was to invite you to tell us a little bit about your work with CFA, because I work to the assumption that people know it, but people might not have heard from you before. So could you please tell us what you have been doing? It's a lot, but a summary version of it.
Yeah. Well, CFA is a 501c3, a nonprofit education and advocacy organization. We were founded in 1990 as a project of an organization called AfriCare, and we became an independent organization in 1994. But the mission is to educate Americans about Africa, to improve cooperation and coordination among the organizations that work on Africa, and then to shape U.S. policy toward Africa, or to influence the policy so that Africa and African people voices can be heard, and that Africa's priorities can be considered as part of the policy discussion between U.S. and Africa. So CFA plays a very unique role. We're connected to all kinds of entities. And so when you see the reach of CFA, you would be very impressed with the people that we have access to, both in Africa and here in the United States, in the Congress and the administration, across the African continent and across the diaspora. It was interesting on this trip. We came back from a field visit to a hospital one evening, and it was like 9 o'clock, and we were all exhausted. And the Malian song singer, Khalifa Kito, who is the #1 Mali singer in the world. I mean, the #1. He's the Michael Jackson of Mali. Was standing at the front of the hotel waiting to meet me. He said he had heard of CFA, and he heard that I was here, and so he wanted to greet me. And I was kind of halfway numb because of the trip. But wow, what kind of reach is this that someone like him would know about the Constituency for Africa? I also one of the projects I've given a project to President Obama. I gave him the idea for the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, which is a training program where young African leaders are brought here for 6 weeks of training in the summer, leadership training. Some of it's about trade, some of it's about healthcare and so forth. But these are the best and the brightest in Africa. And so then they go back home, and some of these young people are eventually going to be president, prime ministers, and what have you. So wherever I go to Africa, I always meet up with some of the alumni, those who were in the YALI program, and I met with some here in Bamako, and they think I'm open the door for them in their lifetime mission, and I'm happy about that. And all I ask is do well, do good, and let's make sure you make a great contribution to Africa and to African people. So CFA is a networking organization, so a lot of people eventually hear about it. They don't know much about it. Some people think I have a big staff. I don't. Some people think I have a lot of money. I don't. They think it's a big, huge organization with a lot of influence. It has a lot of influence, but it's not financed like the traditional organizations are. When you think about the Brookings institutions and the Center for Strategic and International Studies and Woodrow Wilson Center and all these institutions that are think tanks, they're well funded. You go to their office and you see millions of dollars haven't been spent for them. But with CFA, you're really talking about a network of people who are committed to Africa and to African, and these are coming out of the spirit of the African diaspora. And so one of the things that we've proven that you don't have to have millions to have impact, and even the individual, if you get yourself organized, can have a lot more impact. Rather than to agonize, you can organize. You don't have to accept the fate of things as they are. You can help to actually be part of the effort to change them for the better.
Right. So thank you again for that detailed introduction about what CFA does, and I really wanted our viewers to understand the background, to have a background on which you are sharing your perspectives. So back to the question about U.S.-Africa relationships. In your opinion, as somebody who has been working in this space for quite a while, what do you think are the areas, or in what areas has the U.S. failed to understand Africa, or has Africa failed to understand the United States? And how has that influenced the relationships we have today?
Well, I think it goes both ways. Everybody knows Africa has leadership challenges. And you have 50-something countries, I think 54 is the number, for a continent. Do we need 54 countries? That means 54 armies, 54 embassies, 54 presidents, 54 presidential limousines. Do we need all that? Is that the best strategy here in 2023, with technology being what it is? So Africa must get organized and unified. I've been very excited about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Kelly Minna, who's a friend, is a dynamic young guy with passion and skill, and doing a tremendous job changing the paradigm. Every week you hear about some country letting go their visa restrictions. You're hearing about all kinds of efforts. We need to scale it up. Sometimes Africans will say things, but they won't do things. It's very easy to say, yeah, we're going to be, and then you go through the border and boy, you can't get through no matter what. Yeah. So we got to go beyond the rhetoric. And, so it's not just on the United States. Africans must do a better job. I'm convinced that the African Union should be doing a lot more than it's doing. It seemed to have went backpedaled here in the United States over the last several years. We were making good progress. I was part of the conference in South Africa in 2012 where we launched the sixth region, and it's going to be there. They spent, I think, $7 million was spent on that conference. All of these countries there and, talking about the sixth region and where are we now? Where are we? We've gone completely backward, right? Yeah. So you can't blame the U.S. or UK or Canada or anybody for that. This is Africa's mission, and they can talk about the whys and all that, but still, we say this is the sixth region, but where is the beef? Where is the reality to it? Now in the United States, I think the biggest problem remains that Americans are uneducated, undereducated, and miseducated about Africa. Sure, in Washington and Boston and New York and the big cities, yeah, you got a lot of Africans living there, and you got a lot of people, universities and so forth, who know about, a lot about Africa. But if you go outside of the Beltway, you go outside to Ohio and to Nebraska and to Wisconsin and places around the country, and you say, how many countries in Africa? Boy, you'll get some crazy stretch of imagination. Oh, there's 1,000. Oh, there's one country. Oh, So how are we going to do trade, and how are we going to do some of this technology partnerships and so forth if the American people don't even understand what they're dealing with? At the local level, there's a big need to educate Americans about Africa. Now that gets into Congress. Congress responds to what the people say. They represent districts, and so the congressperson who's representing, say, Michigan, the citizens of Michigan, if they weigh in and say, we want this or we want that, you'll find out that the member of Congress said, yes, this is what we need to have. But that's not happening when it comes to Africa because, we're not organized. Even the African around the United States are not organized sufficiently to have impact on policy. CFA does. We've had a lot of impact on U.S. policy. The Biden administration's Africa strategy came from us. We provided the base for it. But I think we could be doing a lot more if we were to get organized sufficiently as a diaspora to have more impact on U.S. policies toward Africa. We can drive it. If you leave it up to the politicians at the White House and the State Department to make the policy in Africa, it'll get all gummed up for sure. And I'm looking at the U.S-Africa summit. It was a very impressive gathering. Something like 50 countries showed up. And we promised so many billions of dollars. And I'm looking at this saying, okay, we were bad mouthing China. China is this and China is that. But when you go to Africa, you land at an airport that was built by China. You go into the city on a big brand new highway built by China. You pass the railroad going past you, built by China. You see that port down there, built by China. And we over here talking about China's bad, And so we got to show ourselves. That's why this healthcare, we were to talk about building, 5 state-of-the-art hospitals that haven't been seen in the world, and build them in Africa, with the United States brand on it. Tell me that won't have a lot of impact on how the Africans see the United States. We need to do a better job of telling our story, but we also need a better job of delivering on assistance and delivering on our technical cooperation with the continent.
a perfect segue into the whole conversation around deliverance, especially on behalf of on the part of the U.S. government delivering on some of its promises and commitments to the continent of Africa. Question about PEPFAR. Why is it struggling? Why is the funding struggling in Congress? Because you mentioned Congress earlier in your presentation.
Well, it's struggling simply because, as I was saying, Americans are uneducated, undereducated, miseducated. AIDS is no longer in the news as it was. COVID come along, and for the average person, they think that it's not in the news. It's no longer a problem. Anybody with rational, who understood it, would understand that this is absolutely, it was the best healthcare intervention in history. And if we don't maintain it, and if we don't, trust me, we'll be back in that same problem again. And so the biggest part of the problem is Congress is not able to meet about anything. And the issues going on with the U.S. Congress means that we can't even have the debate effectively in Congress. And so it's not just with PEPFAR, it's with AGOA, it's with all kinds of things that affect not only Africa, but the rest of the world, and including the United States. We're not able to have an effective debate in Congress to come up with decisions on some of this stuff. So the problem with PEPFAR is largely one of, people have forgotten about it. And a lot of the people who were heavily involved in the PEPFAR, including my former chairman, Ron Dellums, who passed away, they're gone. They're gone. You got a whole new crew in the U.S. Congress. All these young people. I'm glad they're young, but the reality is they don't have any kind of institutional memory about what we ought to be doing. So I think the kind of work that CFA do is absolutely crucial. But we're very small. We need a lot more people, a lot more resources to really have the impact that we need to have to make sure that U.S. government stand up on some of these critical conditions, critical issues affecting not just Africa, but people worldwide.
Right. Two things that I can think of. One, you talked about, there are newer people because the people who were originally part of the PEPFAR program have either retired or passed away. But then President Biden recently also launched a team of experts, or I don't know, I forget the actual title, of Africans or African American. I think
African Diaspora.
African Diaspora Group. Yeah, I forget the right title, but it's to advise the administration on issues around Africa. What are your thoughts about? I know you behind the scenes. I know you've been advocating for this for not even behind the scenes, for quite a while. So
not just behind the scene, in front of the scene.
Even on my show before, we talked about this. Yeah. And so that is one question. And the second was, no, let's start with that one.
Well, it is a recommendation that we made first to Obama, and Obama came back with they accepted our deal of diaspora engagement, but they passed it on to the Secretary of State, who was then Hillary Clinton. And Hillary ended up saying, okay, all diaspora will be in one bucket. So whether you're from the African diaspora or Sri Lanka diaspora or India diaspora or whatever, you're in the diaspora basket. So nothing got done with it. It just completely nothing got done. Biden picked it back up again. We advocated for it. And so they did announce, I was really talking to them on a regular basis. I was surprised by, the people who they selected. They seemed to went with the people who access to resources, because this is the fundraising season. And then they clearly were aiming at a consensus. They wanted people who were not going to go against maybe what the Biden administration was doing, but it's going to go along with it. And the reality about diaspora, you shouldn't be totally in one camp. There should be some pressure. I don't care what the U.S. government is doing. We want to push them to do more. Even if they're doing great work already, you don't say, oh, they're doing great work and we all happy. No, you should do more. It's just the nature of advocacy is that it's not like you're against them. We're with you, but we want you to do more. And I think that so we'll see. It's just getting started. It's a new initiative. Unfortunately, Biden will not be able to go to Africa as promised this year because of the Israel-Hamas war. He was going to go to Africa, and he was going to go to the climate change conference. But because of the war, he's not able to do it. So next year, I doubt if he's going to be able to do it because of the campaign. So that's off the table. And so I don't know what I'm definitely going to support the administration. Anything they want me to do, they know they could call me at any point, and I'm gonna do what I can to help them, give them some advice. But right now we don't know exactly what the strategy is. It sounds good, but okay, what's going to come out of it? You just can't go with the sound bite. You got to actually see what the follow-up is going to be. All of them are good people. I'm not going to, bemoan that. I know about half of them at least, and they're good people. They're people who really are outstanding in their own careers. But to move the diaspora is going to require more than that. But I'm on board. I'm certainly going to support them any way I can.
Right. And then the second question was about the cancer moonshot, since you've mentioned President Biden a lot, and also some of the policies we had pivoted away from PEPFAR, and the other policy that I could think of that is not just for, well, it's not a policy per se, but it's a goal. The goals of the cancer moonshot to be extended to low and middle income countries, including Africa. What are some of your thoughts around the cancer moonshot and how the different ways that it could actually have impact on the country?
Well, I think, again, it's a soundbite. When you say about a cancer moonshot, oh, like we went to the moon, we did all this kind of thing. I mean, sure, I got it. But the reality is it's not going to go anywhere without advocacy. Unless you can somehow make politicians understand that if you don't vote for this cancer moonshot, you're not going to get reelected. You got to have some pressure on people to do things. Remember, the Congress, their main priority is to get reelected. And how are you going to say, oh, can you support the cancer moonshot to Africa, when in fact other priorities, including how I'm going to raise money to stay in Congress, it got my attention. And so I see us saying this kind of thing as, sure, it sounds nice, but I don't hear the buzz out here in the community. I don't hear anybody call me up and say, man, what's happening with the cancer moonshot? I think there's a lot of work to be done in order to get the momentum building. You're not going to just get it talking to other scientists and other people who get it. How does it resonate with the man in the street, the woman in the supermarket, young people who are in college? How does it resonate with them? When again, you're talking about cancer, most Americans don't know cancer is an issue in Africa. They still don't know anything about Africa. They certainly don't know that cancer is a problem in Africa. They know about Ebola. They heard about AIDS. They heard about some other things. So there's a big job to, there's a lot of work ahead to get Americans on board to get behind something like that. You got to have champions in Congress. Who are the 3 or 4 members of Congress who get it, who are ready to lend their name and their expertise to fight for it? I don't see that yet. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. Not that it shouldn't. I think it's tremendous. I mean, I think the U.S. could be helping a lot more on the healthcare side. I just think that that's one area that, you won't find a country that has better health systems and more qualified research and medical professionals than you got here in the United States. And a lot of them are African. John and Kingason, the head of PEPFAR from Cameroon, the head of PEPFAR. And so we have a lot of work to do on the advocacy side and to build in the relationships to make something like a cancer moonshot a reality.
And so as a person who is in communication and media, I'm always interested in asking, people like yourself, what are some of the ways that we can use platforms like this to raise awareness or to reach the people who need to be reached in order to make sure that this is implemented?
Well, the media is a funny business. We have to reach it at different levels. We need to reach it at a grassroots level. We need to reach it at the level of Oprah Winfrey or 60 Minutes. We need to reach it at various levels to get Americans to understand some of this stuff. For me, the media is a major tool for educating people. Certainly, you have the political agenda, got other agendas too, but it could be a very, very effective tool to educate people if done right. But when you talk about cancer in Africa, and I know firsthand, I've seen it firsthand, the challenges on the continent. And one of the biggest challenges, most people can't get properly diagnosed because they don't have equipment, they don't have the radiation technology, And so by the time you figure out you got cancer, or they figure out you got cancer, it's way too late, and your only option is going to be to die. Way too many people in Africa don't get diagnosed. And if they get diagnosed, they get diagnosed way too late. And even if they get diagnosed, there's no resources to properly care for them. And so we have a lot of work to do on it. But I think the priority, there got to be much more advocacy coming from Africa demanding this kind of help. For us to be over here talking about it, it comes across a little bit like crying. But the Africans need to have it on the table when they sit down with the U.S. government, that this is priority, one of the top 2 or 3 priorities for Africa. And we should be able to measure the result, and we should be able to do a lot more. But with technology being what it is, artificial intelligence, with telemedicine, all this kind of thing, to me, we should be doing a lot more to address the health challenges facing the continent.
That is, first of all, I'm very excited to hear you talk about telehealth, because that is an area that I'm passionate about and I'm exploring in my education, like understanding, how it can be harnessed, or technology can be harnessed to bridge this divide. And of course, yesterday, I talked to somebody about my friend Lamin about electricity, because it has a huge influence on technology and how it can be applied on the continent of Africa. And I saw one of your people in the delegation to Mali was someone in the renewable energy sector. So I hope that, there are areas of convergence that can be, harnessed in your conversations to create some kind of action plans to really improve the healthcare sector.
But the reality is, it needs to be more than me, It has to be more than me. And all too often, we'll sit back and watch somebody do all the work. When I see how the diaspora spends money here in the United States, there's a wedding going on in Houston this weekend, and I'm not mentioning them. But I'm saying, when it comes down to how much money are they spending on that wedding?
It's Africa. It's so weird.
Nigeria. Oh Lord! But when it comes to funding CFA, so we could do town meetings around the United States about Africa, and we can mobilize the diaspora around these cities and so forth to move forward, you can't find $1 to do it. Now you have to explain that to me, because I don't get it. I don't get it. Where are the Tony Aluminus when you need this kind of research? Where are Dan Gote when you need these kind of resources? You want the diaspora to stand up in the United States and places like that to fight for Africa, but you're not ready to get behind them, give them the resources that they need to properly fight. I'm telling you, I'm only, call me inspirational if you want to, but I'm only one person. And, it's only a matter of time when I won't be able to do this. And so are we organizing to have the and I don't think we are, honestly.
I fully agree. And it doesn't happen just in raising money for town halls or advocacy, but also other, areas, raising money for education, for building infrastructure, for building businesses. It's a struggle, and I have no answer to that one. It has also puzzled me as an African and African diaspora, but we'll keep trying. So use the platforms that we have to keep saying that, hopefully. But that said, it's all not terrible. I just want to mention that there are certain efforts being done, like the Global Health Catalyst. Really, they're bringing together all these people to do something. So there are people who are doing things in their spaces to make a difference, and we can only hope that the more diaspora will do what they can in their fields to bridge disparities.
But if you're really talking about transforming how the U.S. and how the world deals with Africa, we really absolutely have to scale up dramatically. Absolutely. And I don't see the will for that happening. Africa and African people worldwide must unite and get organized if we are to survive really as a people. And I think that the challenges are great. I think that the time is limited. I think this next 10 years is going to be crucial for Africa. And I'm prayerful. I'm hopeful. I wish. But if you ask me, are we ready to go? Do I see us ready to go? No, we're not.
Well, Melvin, we can, I think, spend the day just talking about Africa, because you're such a resource, and I can't say this enough. It's always a pleasure and an honor to have conversations with you. They range in they go to all sectors, and which is okay, because it's all interconnected. But yeah. I want to say welcome back from Mali. Maybe before we wrap up, what are some of your key lessons and best practices from your recent trip to Mali as we wind down?
Well, the main thing for me, we ought to practice people-to-people diplomacy as the first step in our relationship with African countries. It seemed to me that the diaspora from these countries ought to be the first one reached out to by the administration. These Malians who I'm meeting here in the United States are, top shelf. I mean, these are brilliant people. You'll find the same thing with Cameroon and Tanzania and all these other countries.
Uganda.
Diaspora. Well, Uganda. You want me to go down the whole 54 list, and I'm trying to be inclusive. But my point is the diaspora is under-tapped in this process. We'll go to war with your country without talking to you. And that's a mistake, Before we have a policy on Mali, we should have talked to the diaspora from Mali here in the United States as a first step. And so I'm hoping that we can do more people-to-people diplomacy going forward. And I think that we hope we can motivate more diaspora to take an active role in, these kinds of things, that the Malians are just thrilled that they helped to drive this process to bring this into reality, to bring a trade mission to Mali. And this is something that, has had tremendous impact across the spectrum in Mali. And so I think this can be duplicated in other countries, and it should be. And it also shows where diaspora can work together to actually make some things happen. So a lot of good is coming out of it. I'm working on my final report, which I hope to have ready next week.
I hope I can get to read the report as well.
You will.
But with that, thank you so much, Mr. Foote, for your time, for being my guest on this show. And I look forward to bringing you back, because this is never going to end until until we can say no more. But I appreciate the work that you do in advocating for great U.S.-Africa policy and ideas and harnessing relationships. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you for having me.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching. Till next time.